Hey Rock Hill, Pastor Kyle here talking about the sermon from last week. We looked at Romans chapter 14 verses 1 to 12 and how do we handle debatable matters as Christians? How do we interact with people who disagree with us on matters of conscience where the Bible isn't explicitly clear or doesn't mandate exactly how things work out? Whether that be alcohol or tobacco or tattoos or movies or dancing or playing cards or all of these things that people often get very, very fired up about that are matters of personal holiness. If we're serious about holiness, we need to develop some personal legalisms in our own life in areas where we're weak. I use the word personal and legalism very intentionally in that these are personal, not to be broadcast or projected on everybody else. Legalisms in that these are just boundary markers for us in areas that we're weak so that we don't fall into sin, but they really have no power to transform our heart. The problem comes when we take those personal legalisms and we project them on everybody else and bind everybody else with our particular conscience. That's actually not a very helpful thing to do. In many ways, it's because some people don't struggle in the same areas we do, and they need personal legalisms in an area that simply you don't need them, and you have freedom to participate. Paul, as he writes to the Roman church, talks about two things in particular. One, is a Christian free to eat meat that's been sacrificed to a pagan idol? And second, what is a Christian to do about those Jewish holy days that were required celebrating days in the Old Testament? And the first one, the two schools of thought were, well, idols aren't real things, and so it really has no power to bind us. And so as a Christian, I'm free to eat. I know that idols don't have any power, and so I'm going to eat meat regardless of where it came from. I'm going to do that, and I don't feel any kind of conviction about doing that because I know there's one God in heaven, and his name is Jesus, revealed to us. The other school of thought was that a Christian should have nothing to do with pagan ceremonies and idolatries. Therefore, and in the context, Paul says the one who is not free to eat is the weaker brother who has a weaker conscience, and that he's to be fully convinced in his own mind that for me that would be wrong to do. I don't want to participate in that. But for someone who doesn't have the same conscience binding in that particular area, they're free to eat meat. The thing that they're to think about is that they're to not go against their conscience, not sear their conscience, but they're also to be mindful of those around them and not for the sake of pursuing freedom, trample on the conscience and cause our brothers to sin, or brothers and sisters to fall into sin. And so they're to be they're not to let their freedom be trampled on, but they're also to be governed by love. Of how do I love my brother or sister in the midst? The holy days, he said, if your conscience wants you to, they're very fruitful to celebrate, but it's not binding on everybody that we need to celebrate. Those things were fulfilled in Jesus Christ. They help us to understand who Jesus is and what he does, and so we're not bound to continue celebrating them, although it's great reminders and can be very worshipful in order to do so. So in areas of alcohol or tobacco or tattoos or dancing or the type of movies that you watch, I think there are some things that are black and some things that are white. I also think that there are different shades of gray in different people's consciences regarding those things. We need to exercise wisdom. We need to ask, does this activity honor the Lord? Not just can I honor the Lord while doing it, but does this activity honor the Lord? And as we sort those things out in our own conscience, some will feel one way and some will feel another, and we're to be governed by love and unity, and we're to give grace to one another. We're also to be there and ask good questions of each other so that we're not cavalier about sin and falling into sin. I hope this provokes a good dialogue in your city groups. I hope this provokes a good discussion amongst family members and spouses, and that we would be a church that's marked by holiness and marked by love. That we would be people that agree on the essentials and agree on the issues of who Jesus is and why he came and how we're saved. And in the matters where we disagree, we show charity and love toward one another. We care about holiness, but we also care about unity. There's much more to come this week as we will talk about laying down our freedoms for the sake of love. And what I would just encourage you with is, if you are unable to lay down your freedoms, are you really free? If you're unable to let go of your freedoms, you're probably not free. There might be a little bit of a grip that has in your life. More on that this week. Can't wait.